our PRISM meeting. I don't know why, but Crosby didn't get let in straight away. Anyway, I'll let people in. If the lobby thing doesn't work, I'll let people in. But good evening and welcome to this PRISM webinar this evening. Yet again, I think I say this every single week when we have these, it is raining. Hopefully the weather will change soon. And tonight we bring you the webinar of taking control, spotlight on retailers and consumers. Sorry, I was reading to you next week's title there. We have spotlight on retail and consumers with Olivia Morris, who is the category controller here at ABP UK Business, responsible for the category function, delivering insights about the retail landscape and to the end consumer. So she works with all our different retail partners, and Olivia will give you an insight into some of our work this evening. And hopefully you'll all have lots of questions, but if we can just hold the questions until the end, that'll be great. And then Olivia will be happy to take questions then. If you need to, obviously just jot them down so you don't forget your questions. And I will hand over to Olivia to share her screen, if that's all right.
Perfect. Thanks, Katie. Let me just share my presentation with you guys. Right. You've all gone kind of tiny in the bottom corner, so please let me know that you can see the screen.
Yeah, Katie? I can see that fine. Yeah.
Fab. So, Katie just introduced me, but essentially, yeah, my role as category controller, you aren't supposed to know what category controller even means. But essentially, I would be responsible for our insight function in the fresh UK side of our business. We work with all retailers apart from Waitrose and Lidl, so a good span of retailers that my team sort of cover. And in short, that's market and consumer updates for the guys regularly for all of our customers that kind of help them to plan their beef and lamb offer. So I've got a kind of good overview of the current market and the trends that we're currently navigating. As Katie said, questions at the end will be super helpful because I can't even see you guys when I'm presenting on these slides. So yeah, just note down any questions you've got. So I'll just start with some broad retail headlines and the changes that we've seen really looking over a year of trading. There's a lot of words on here, guys. I'll talk you through the kind of highlights, but this is one of our key sort of retail landscape slides that we've been using recently, just to try and recap some of the things that have been going on in the previous year. Of course, I'm going to mention inflation within the first 5 minutes of presenting to you guys. But the key call out here is actually that inflation is slowing. Key to remember that it's still at a 30-year high, but we're seeing some recovery and we're seeing some customer confidence come back just in the recent couple of months, really. And that's going to change the way that we kind of navigate the forward year with our retailers. Another interesting call out for the recent year would be how retailers have navigated some of that inflationary pressure. They've used a number of different levers, but by far one of the biggest and most sort of impactful to our categories would be loyalty schemes. So you've probably all kind of seen this for yourselves, just in general shopping really, but that's club cards in Tesco's, Nectar in Sainsbury's are bigger than ever. This is their key lever to drive deep cut promotions, and essentially that war on best price continues, but under this umbrella of loyalty and kind of buying the customer into their stores. And we've seen customers really responding. So actually, customers are demonstrating a lot more loyalty to one key retailer. And we've seen what we call kind of fascias visited, but essentially how many different retailers a customer will visit over a given period really kind of shrink back. And it's at a kind of the lowest point for quite a long period of time, actually. And that's suggesting that these loyalty schemes that these big sort of retailers are doing are working to lock them in. Some of the key changes that we've seen in terms of how the customers are behaving would be more treat occasions at home. So this is all about them trying to navigate how they don't go out and spend a fortune in a restaurant, and they try and bring some of those occasions in home. And we've got categories that have really leaned into that. So burgers has had a great summer, and that's not because of the weather, as you guys will all imagine, as you can all imagine. It's actually because we've seen people building burgers at home and making this kind of fake away, we call it, at home, and layering with all the lovely sauces and veg and whatever. Um, there's also steaks performing quite well for us at the moment. So even though people have felt a little bit more strapped for cash over the recent year, this dialing back on restaurant spends and going out and trying to bring some of that treat in home has really worked well for steaks because people can replicate some of their kind of favorite kind of restaurant meals at home. In light of a tougher kind of climate and inflation, there's definitely been a deprioritization in terms of sustainability and health. It definitely falls down the consideration kind of list for shoppers, but we are seeing a little bit of that return as people can afford in terms of disposable income to be to put these things back on the agenda. And that's something I'll talk to a little bit later on. Actually, I have got a couple of slides to show what those trends look like and how we're going to try and navigate that within our categories, what it all really means.
Olivia, you seem to just be on mute.
I haven't been on mute for too long, have I? Have I
No,
only just
literally
muted?
just as you change slides.
Oh, good. Thank you. Okay, so then moving on to a little bit of performance data, and this is looking at red meat overall. So beef, pork, and lamb combined, volume is back versus last year, and value is ahead. Value is only ahead, supported by significant inflation, so that average price increase, which we're able to track in our data. Lamb and pork would be holding the volume back, and I come on to beef specifically on the next slide, but beef has actually seen some volume growth in more recent periods. This is looking over just the recent 12 weeks, but a lot of this trend has continued previous to that. It's largely a cost of product issue. And lamb, therefore, seeing the sort of biggest hit on performance being our most expensive protein. As a result, buyers in red meat overall are back. But what we are seeing is of the existing buyers in the more recent couple of months, people are shopping more frequently. And this is something that you see as people start to kind of return with a bit more confidence and a bit more disposable income. So it's one for us to, really kind of watch and hope to see that dial change further as we approach Christmas now. The retailer switching chart then on the right really represents customer movements broader than red meat. I'd say this is definitely the picture that we're seeing in MFP and even, meat, fish and poultry as a combined category, and even broader than that on fresh food. We would see Tesco, the discounters, and Sainsbury's really winning in this area. And the biggest struggle is seen within Asda and Morrison's at the moment, where those guys seem to have kind of lost their way. I think Tesco and Sainsbury's, as I've already said, have definitely done a very good job with their loyalty schemes to tie customers in and increase basket spend and how frequently they're visiting. So I think that'll continue for the months to come. Okay, and then just delving into beef a bit more specifically, as I said, this is an area where we're actually seeing some volume growth, which is really, really positive. So with strong performance driven by all the retailers mentioned on the previous slide in the main. Inflation's definitely still seen in this category. So there's an average price per kilo number on there is a 2.9 increase, but actually versus wider red meat, that number is quite small, and we're seeing that drop back each period of data that we see. So it's going in the right direction for customers. Lamb, is still sort of making this category. I think people are definitely trading into this category as it's a more affordable option than lamb, essentially. Um, there's been an interesting shift as well in terms of how we've seen the tiers as we refer to them perform. So that's premium, you taste the difference, specially selected finest beef versus standard tier, so by Sainsbury's or Ashfield's Farm perform. And this trend, even though I talk about inflation and pressure on the pockets for customers, this trend just really reflects that customers are treating themselves to some nice meals at home, and our proteins are really good sort of centerpiece for that. And like I said, the likes of burgers and steaks doing well in this area is where premium, seeing 21% growth, has really kind of come into play. And this slide just kind of reflects that point a little bit more and gives you some of the numbers behind the comments that I've made around steaks and around burgers. So you can see all growth across burgers in all tiers, but more so in premium. And again, with steaks, double-digit growth in premium tier steaks and burgers. The retailers are doing a lot in terms of driving promotion through that tier, though, as well. It's worth noting just to try and engage people to kind of trade up, push their spend a little bit further, and it's reflecting in the numbers. And I think this will definitely continue. We see really strong promotional plans as you come into Christmas. You get things like the half price beef joints and stuff like that. So increased promotions is going to continue, and that trade up actually from a standard tier product to premium will be part of that. Okay, so top line performance on lamb. As I said, this category reflects volume decline, but value growth of 7.3%, which is the number at the top left. That's driven by a rise in average price, so a 9.2% growth versus 2.7 on the previous slide for beef. So inflating at a much higher rate still, and not kind of paring back in the most recent months or anytime soon. Been able to drive growth. So you'll see Tesco, as I said, and Sainsbury's performing really well with their loyalty schemes. And what they're doing here is using promotions tied to club card price or promotions tied to nectar price in these more expensive areas to try and retain people in the category. And it is working for them. They're driving growth when there's overall market decline. Okay, so that's all I've got in terms of market performance data for you. In summary, we've got a bit of a different picture in beef as to what we've got in lamb. Lamb's definitely been hit harder by the pressure that average price is putting on our categories. Promotions are more important than ever, really, and retailers are definitely flexing that. We'll see more of that to come in the Christmas period, I think. And even on lamb, you have half price promotions and things like that. There's some big buys and there's some big kind of activation that we're going to see retailers doing. They're going to be really trying to get behind lamb for Christmas, which is great. Winning retailers in summary, Tesco and Sainsbury's, thanks to their loyalty schemes, and they are really buying customers in, shopping around a lot less. Discounters continue to win shoppers in terms of the value proposition that they offer. So in this next section, I'll just touch on a few things that have happened in the market that you may or may not have seen. I've got a few visuals and less charts in this section, so that's always positive. Okay, this one I'm sure a few of you will have seen, and depending on where you will shop, you may have even experienced some of these packaging changes that have happened within mints. So essentially, the mission that we've been on with all of our retailers is reducing plastic. They have some hefty targets in terms of plastic reduction, and one of the key areas to kind of tackle here for us was mints, just because of the sheer volume that goes through this product group. Many retailers have kind of moved into VAC, which is on the far right. I mean, Flex is an internal name for this, but this is essentially vacuum sealed, which also gives date life benefits and longer lasting life for the retailers, but then obviously delivering that to the customer as well. Couple of retailers are moving in a slightly different direction. So Tesco are currently trialing what we call a pillow pack, but essentially the Waitrose type pack that's still got some air in the pack, and the product looks a bit more typical of what we'd have sort of seen in a plastic tray. And it's a bit of a watch this space really as to whether that one gets rolled out in Tesco or whether they choose to go to the VAC mints on the right hand side. But essentially it kind of saw volumes dip off initially when we first made this move. It was a little bit scary. Sainsbury's went out on a limb and did it on their own, and it was a little bit scary to the customer why their mints looked like this. But I think now we've seen enough retailers move that customers are kind of getting used to this way of shopping, and they aren't thinking I'll go over the road somewhere else and get something different essentially. So the volume's definitely stabilized here, and customers are a bit more used to shopping. And the plastic reduction that's been made is phenomenal. So it's a good win for the category overall. And then I mentioned the steaks category quite a bit in terms of having a good time in the current climate, despite being a more expensive format and a more expensive product type. Customers are looking to treat themselves. In light of this, we've seen a little bit of innovation in terms of how Asda and Tesco are showing up in steaks. First one being Asda have moved to exceptional. So this is replacing their what we'd have all known as sort of extra special. Um, it looks fab. It's a nice glossy pack, all on sort of skin pack trays. And the key messages that they're trying to drive here is grass fed, which is really interesting. So Lidl would have been the only retailer to boldly put grass fed on pack. Exceptional doesn't have grass fed on every pack, and I'm not sure about the technicalities in the background as to why that is. But on a couple of products, they are kind of leading with a grass fed claim. And any kind of customer insight and research that we've done in the past, that kind of really resonates with shoppers. So we'll see. That's a bit of a watch and brief as well. This has been in range for about 3 weeks, so we don't have any data as to how these things are performing, but they definitely look good, and hopefully help to drive a little bit of performance for beef for Asda actually. And then in terms of Tesco, we've got some new steak launches as well. So they've gone quite the opposite way. So rather than reducing in packaging, they've introduced these sort of card boxes, and they do look fab at fixture. They've put some nice kind of, we would call them restaurant cuts, but Cote de Boeuf and a bit more fancy kind of product names and cuts, thick cuts, bone-in, sirloin, things like that into this offer. And it's really pushing that price point up, but early signs are showing that this range is working quite well for them, really leaning into the fact that customers want to treat themselves. And in terms of the pack call outs that they've done here, it boasts a kind of 35-day matured offer. Other than that, it's the packaging doing the talking and the kind of standout appeal. Okay, so then the last section that I've got for you guys today is sort of consumer insight and some of the trends. A few will be a bit repetitive as to what I've said has driven the recent performance, but then I'll touch a little bit on some of those health and sustainability agendas and how we think that's going to play out in the category over the next coming, well, year, I suppose. Um, so first up would be trading up. I'm going to click across and just intro all these elements to the slide. So the first trend that we're seeing is definitely that trading up. There's a real place for premium products. We're equipped in terms of beef. It's not, I suppose, within I suppose chicken. There's little glamorizing kind of chicken, but we are lucky to have breadth across our different cuts, and we've got everything from mince to fancy steaks. So we can dial into that, I think, a lot more than we already are with steaks and with burgers as well, as we wouldn't kind of recognize it as particularly premium, but there's definitely this restaurant style meal at home being created, which burgers leans into. So yeah, that's everything that I've kind of said. I think we can just expect to see retailers promoting premium a lot more because they really are trying to trade people up and just push their pound a little bit further. The next one, again, I've said the word already, but fakeaways. But quite an interesting trend that's kind of coming up the tracks is that especially kind of younger shoppers and pre-family, we call them. So essentially no kids, no dependents, and just like young couples living together. There's this trend around global cuisine and feeling quite adventurous. Pan-Asian has had a huge kind of spike in the recent year, and chicken fakeaways, which is less kind of adventurous. But these are all winning meal solutions that we've been able to kind of identify. And what was really interesting is digging into it is, yes, they may be appearing more adventurous in terms of the flavors and the meal type, but very rarely are they cooking these themselves. So this does pose a bit of a challenge for us in terms of getting our protein into the center of these kind of occasions, because we've definitely got a customer coming up the ranks that wants all this kind of fancy stuff, and to be able to take the photo and say, look at my dinner for this evening, but without knowing how to actually make it themselves. So we've got a big education piece here. And again, luckily, I do think with across our kind of range of cuts, we've got varying levels of engagement needed to cook. It's not everything is a joint where you kind of need the skill set. And something we've got to be mindful of is we've got some more expensive cuts like joints, like steaks, that younger shoppers are quite scared to kind of get wrong and therefore might not go there. So we kind of need to help them, educate them, get more on packs, back of packs have really kind of skimmed down to the bare minimum cooking instructions. And it's how we dial that back up to kind of engage and educate people to do your fancy meals and all your flavors, use sauces, but still use your core kind of protein, and be responsible for cooking a little bit from scratch. And it ties into the next pillar, the third one along, which we called fuss free. But essentially, what I'm taking from this is scratch cooking is at a 5-year low. And this pre-families are driving this trend. They kind of would have the most amount of time out of everybody. They don't have kids or anything, but they've got more time, but they don't necessarily want to be spending it in the kitchen. But there's also this angle of, I also want to say I've had this fancy meal or tried this new recipe or this new ingredient. So we've got a journey to go on with these guys. And our focus here will be some of the quicker to go stuff that they can kind of interact with easily, and then dialing up education on some of the other cuts to try and get them into their core repertoire of meals through the week. And then the last one, better choices. This kind of encapsulates two things. This is the sustainability measures and health. So firstly, in terms of sustainability, we take a read on like where people class themselves, and there is a little bit of a say-do divide, but more people in the recent few months have considered themselves eco-actives. Does this necessarily mean that they're doing anything and taking big action? No, but they are considering it more. They want to be more mindful with purchase, and that all comes with confidence, in economic confidence, really. So it's one for us to watch, and for us to really be gearing up our products ready for when we want to put messages on pack and educate customers a little bit more about sustainability within our category. And then the other element here that calls out food waste would sit more would sit within sustainability as well, sorry. And that is that customers are kind of starting to talk a little bit more around food waste. So there's definitely stuff we can do to talk about making our products go a little bit further, freezing, how many meals can they make, and educating them a little bit more, because they want really convenient things. So we're like, well, yeah, food waste could be higher if you're kind of making all these fancy meals and not really using the rest of the ingredients. We need to educate them to get the most out of their product. And then the other element was health. I'll come on to them in a little bit more detail in the next couple of slides, and then over to you guys for questions. So thinking ahead, our key focuses have got to be around convenience, for the here and now, really, and the customer that we're currently kind of serving. And then the future customer is the health and sustainability piece. So starting off with convenience, I mean, I give spoilers for my own future slides. Essentially, evening meals, that middle chart is showing the evening meals have dialed right back. So that are scratch cooked, sorry. So there's definitely this sentiment that younger shoppers and even just people post-COVID really are given less time to cook in. So we really need to adapt our products to cater for that. And there are innovations happening. We've done things like quick cook steaks and things like that that can call out short cook times and things. But even some of the kind of core repertoires that we've listed along the side, a bolognese, a chili, a soup, we're finding cooking them from scratch is back quite significantly. The use of sauces in kits that make people feel like they've had a bit of interaction, but they haven't had to do the full thing, are in growth. And then ready meals are in significant growth. And actually, we know that they cost more. So we've got that to kind of deal with these customers. But there are categories definitely where we can do that, I think. Second pillar being health. So when we go through kind of, I'm going to click along, sorry. When we go through kind of periods of financial instability and uncertainty, we definitely see this drop right off the pad for customers. But in recent months, we are hearing a little bit more from customers that they want to be educated on this stuff. Once again, there's a few kind of key buzzwords at the moment. And I think one of them that you guys will be familiar with as well, because you'll have read or heard about this, but ultra processed is a big buzzword at the moment. And this is all about families trying to ensure that, yeah, they're avoiding ultra processed foods. There's a real pushback on some of these convenient meal solutions, which contradicts all the stuff that I've said in my last slide. But essentially, going forward, there's going to be this pushback on some of these convenient meal solutions because they are actually just overly processed, and what in some of the ingredients decks are as long as your arm kind of thing. And I think there's going to be a realization from customers, and that's where our category is going to come into its own. We've got a very natural food source in red meat, and we just need to shout about that a little bit louder. There's definitely more noise in some of these other aisles, ready meals. They're even like food to go, sandwiches, stuff like that. They're all making every claim that they can, dairy, whatever. And I think there's a lot more that we're trying to do within meat, and some of the retailers have possibly been a little bit reluctant before, with a view of, well, customers know this. They know it's high in protein, for example, but actually we're trying to argue at the moment they kind of need it shouted about because the noise from elsewhere could be overriding some of those messages. So that's the mission we're going to try and go on with health, I think, a little bit over the next year or so. And then the last one just touches on that, how we kind of group sustainability when we're talking to customers and where they bucket themselves. And essentially, this just suggests, the data only goes up to 2023, but even versus 2022, in 2023, we saw more people consider themselves eco-considerers, basically telling us that, or eco-actives, telling us that it's back on their radar, and we'll see that even more this year as inflation slows, new government in place and everyone's calmed down a little bit. So we've got quite a good kind of team in place internally working on what this looks like. But yeah, the key bit for me is understanding, within my role is definitely what do customers care about, what good stuff are we doing that we can already talk to them about, because I think there's a lot in terms of farm stories and stuff. So that's the mission in sustainability. I've done enough talking. Can I chuck it over to you guys to ask me some questions?
Do you want to just unshare a second,
Yeah.
Olivia? Then we can see everyone that's got the cameras on. Harry, you had a question first of all. Carry on.
Yeah, thanks. Just 2 points really. It's quite interesting. You said there's growth in the ready meals, but people are more conscious of ultra processed food. And as you said, ready meals tend to be processed. Are you looking into that market slowing down? And what are you going to do to be ahead of the curve, or what's our supermarket going to be to be ahead of the curve with that? And another point is, it's very good to hear that premium beef is selling as a higher growth than anything else. Is that due to they perceive it to be better eating quality? And if so, is there an opportunity for supermarkets to try and push for eating quality payments for farmers? Changing the grade that we get paid on for our carcasses instead of yield and shape to eating quality of the meat, similar to the Australian model, possibly. Yeah, that's it.
Thanks, Harry. I'll let you answer those, Olivia.
Yeah, definitely. So to your first question, I think ultra process is something that we're trying to we're probably being quite we are being quite polite about it with retailers when we're talking to them at the moment. We're trying to make them aware that this is coming up the tracks. I don't think we do as much shouting as other categories do. And we aren't throwing too much shade in the direction of ready meals or anything. But yeah, there's definitely going to be a swing. What we've got to do is support the retailers in how to communicate it to the customer. So there's initial stuff that I think is just getting stuff on pack. We work with the likes of AHDB, and they've recently done their great source of vitamin D. They've done a vitamin B, sorry. They have done high in protein campaigns, and all the retailers are really engaged on those. So there's an element of just like lifting those cues out and slapping it on pack if we can. And then there's the education piece on cook for yourselves, and then you don't have to worry, essentially, and we will end up saying there's all this in your ready meals and you can replicate it at home for a better price per portion, and it can last you for longer or whatever. So yeah, we're definitely going to take them on the journey. I think there's definitely an inspiration piece, getting people to cook themselves and making recipes that kind of replicate what's going on in ready meals that people still feel like they can make themselves. To the second question, I don't know about pricing and grading. I suppose we definitely do test. We do all the kind of consumer taste panels and stuff before we launch products, and there is a recognizable eating difference between our premium products and our standard products. There's different maturation processes and things like that I think the technical guys would say are perfected to try and ensure that there's a reason for customers to spend a little bit more on premium. How that looks in terms of, yeah, I wouldn't be able to answer the second part of that question. That is, will there be a point when retailers are paying a difference at grading for that?
That's all right. We can ask colleagues, Harry, and we can feed back to you on that once we've asked some colleagues. Nigel.
Can I ask a follow-on question to the previous, which was, first of all, how do you determine what goes into a premium pack? Are all your, say, take Sainsbury's as an example then, or probably apply to Tesco as well, they all Angus? Or could they be any breed?
It depends what their spec is, but Tesco on premium would all be Angus. Sainsbury's aren't. Again, I'm not very good with this side of things, but I know for sure there would be a difference between by Sainsbury's and Taste the Difference in terms of the cattle that they're using, the two different grades of cattle. But no, Sainsbury's aren't in AA, to answer that question directly. Tesco are in premium.
Okay. Now, the question I was going to ask before is relating to something we discussed a couple of weeks ago around sustainability. Do you ask the consumer what they understand sustainability to mean? And I ask that like red meat is getting quite a hammering, cattle in particular, with regards to methane emissions. So I was just wondering what sustainability means to your consumers.
Yeah, no, it's a really good question, and we've done quite a lot of insight around this because there have been a few kind of schemes that we've done with different retailers that have looked at future reduction of sort of carbon. And in all honesty, when I've sat in a room and done, there's 12 people, we've got them in and we've kind of probe discussion around this stuff to really eke it out. We've not done any give you a list of things and you tick what you reckon. We've really just tried to leave it to an open floor and say, what does sustainability mean to you? And I will say, it's a very top line understanding, and we have to remind ourselves sometimes that like we are in the industry and we kind of know a lot more. I think there would be a pocket, there's a group X amount of consumers that would have quite a good understanding, but especially the term methane to the average shopper is not on their radar, which I found really interesting because we talk about, in the future being able to deliver lower carbon beef. Well, to do that, you'd have to tell them how you're doing it. You'd have to talk to them about methane. And there is nothing glamorous about putting methane on the front of a steak pack. You're there getting your steak for date night and the word methane's on there, and you're kind of processing what that actually, how that's generated. And yeah, it's not so glamorous. So yeah, to answer your question at the moment, I think customer understanding is like really generalizing here, you know, for the majority that are in Sainsbury's every day, very little understanding. The scary bit is that you've got Netflix and programs about America, and some of that stuff is possibly getting to consumers that's not reflective of the UK market. But overall, there isn't a huge concern for customers here. And I find when you talk to them about what does sustainability mean in our products, they straight away go to plastic reduction. Well, what that is what we've told them, what we trained them, however many years ago, 10, 15 years ago, when plastic bags, you know, became 1p bags. It's what we've put on their radar is what they recognise sustainability to mean, is what I'm trying to say. And we haven't put methane on their radar. It doesn't crop up in the conversation.
Other sectors are putting it on their radar, BBC in particular.
Yes, definitely. But I think, yeah, it's early days in terms of their true understanding on it, is what I'm finding talking to customers.
I think every industry's having to put it on their radar to work together to reduce it, but actually, and I think we maybe need to be careful of what we wish for. Do we want them to actually understand any better than they do now? Or do we want them to stay in their own little bubble where they are now? Because actually, we might need to be careful of what we wish for of them to understand too much more.
Would you say that sustainability means different things to different people? Olivia.
Yeah, it definitely does. I just found in our category, because we haven't put much on their radar, there wasn't loads coming out. But yeah, some people would go down the packaging route, and some people did kind of know what we were talking about in terms of methane. So yeah, means different things to different people.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Adrian.
Evening, Olivia. With cattle numbers decreasing and the price increasing, is there a threat that beef is priced out of the consumer's shopping basket? Two parts. How close are we to that? And with the European herd decreasing 5 times quicker than the UK herd, and them coming in hard looking for our product, is there a threat that suddenly the majority of our stuff will start being exported?
Good questions.
Very good questions. Some that I don't know if I'm rightly placed to actually be able to give you a good answer to. Definitely, I couldn't give you a good answer in terms of the reducing herds and exporting, unfortunately. In terms of what it means for the customer and are we pricing it out of customers' basket, I would say we're definitely seeing elements within certain cuts. A joint is expensive and people don't want to buy it and run the risk of ruining it and the whole Sunday meal's ruined, and younger people ultimately don't know how to cook these things. But overall, we are seeing beef win at the moment. In wider protein, it's performing better than fish. Chicken's the only protein really performing better than beef. So I think we're a good way off it being completely priced out of people's baskets. And I think as well, it's about flexing different cuts.
But your growth is in mince.
Yes, yeah, exactly. I was going to say
which is not, as a producer, you're trying to produce the premium cuts and that is reducing, whereas the cheaper cuts are increasing.
Yeah, definitely. There is this mix. I mean, it's also in steaks, which at the moment is a really positive piece, and we are trying to harness it. If I mentioned steaks so much in the presentation because we are trying to run with that one, which gives us both elements, minced and some of those core cuts. But yeah, that's a challenge.
Yeah, I think brand is going to become. I'm a Scottish farmer, and brand is going to become ever more important.
Yeah.
Would be an observation.
Have you got anything, Olivia, on the second element to that question, or?
No,
Just
sorry.
Just to give you some perspective, the French herd is decreasing at 10% year on year, and they are already coming in and asking about product from the UK because they know they're not going to get it in France, which is only going to push the price up, which is only going to exaggerate the challenge of the consumer buying it. And what, it's great as a farmer to be getting such good money for your product, but there comes a challenge, and that's why I asked how close are we to it, that they stop buying it.
Yeah.
But we've also got to remember that some of the other markets are also great for whole carcass utilisation.
Oh, totally, Katie. I think export's great. You know, if that's where we need to go to sell our beef, then great. You just don't want to kill the home market with price.
Yeah.
Thanks, Adrian.
We've definitely got to go on that journey with customers as well.
Claire, you just need to unmute yourself, Claire.
A few different questions. Adrian, just interest.
Oh, Claire, your signal's not very good. You sound a bit like a robot. Maybe turn your camera off and see if, and then try again.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, that's better.
First, just Adrian, you. Sorry, I will come to you, Olivia. I've just got a few questions.
Don't worry.
Adrian, in Scotland, they have a suckler beef premium, do they still?
Well, it's changing, but yes, there is still one. It is changing as of next year.
And is the herd shrinking in Scotland as it is in the rest of the UK? Is that having, is that a positive, or do you not think it's having an effect?
Well, it's shrinking by 2%. I mean, I think England shrunk by 4% and Scotland shrunk by 2%.
Right. So, yeah.
The main issue, is not price; it's labour availability.
Yeah, pretty much all of them. Right, thank you for that. Just two things, Olivia, really. The first one is the organic market. You said about pasture-fed beef, and is it Tesco's label their premium product, some of them as pasture-fed. Is there much interest in organic beef and lamb, I suppose, from consumers, or is that not really anything on the agenda at all?
Yeah, definitely. We've seen the it's grass fed. It was in Asda highlighting a couple of products on grass fed. There's definitely a continued market for organic beef. It holds even more of a premium, so it comes with all the challenges that we were just saying, and it would still be a small proportion of what we're talking about here. But there's a loyal shopper for it, and the good thing is, with the likes of Sainsbury's, is they shop across everything organic. They are loyal to organic, rather than that opportunity to constantly trade them up if they are a Taste the Difference shopper, for example. So yeah, it's not saying there isn't any interest for it. It would still be relatively small market, and it's only really Sainsbury's and Waitrose playing in it in any big way.
And then the second thing is the anti-meat agenda. Has that calmed down, or is that something that is still, what's driving that? Is it an environmental thing? Is it what is driving the anti-meat agenda? What's the reason for? Is it health? Is it the environment? Is it anti-killing animal, eating meat? From that point of view, it's just intriguing to know what drives that, really.
Yeah, I think there's a few things. To answer your question, we definitely see it calm down in terms of just the stats. Veganism is in decline in the recent 3 years, and vegetarianism's kind of stayed flat. So there hasn't been growth in those diet changes. Something that we are aware of would be there'd be a proportion, still talking sort of single figures, of customers that would tell us that they are actively kind of reducing the amount of meat that they have. That would be, I drop one meal a week, I drop meat out of one meal a week and just have like a pasta and a sauce or whatever, right? So their agenda, that isn't like the extreme anti-meat that are all about the environmental or welfare side of it. This is just a health focus, really, in terms of the news being, you know, red meat, and you don't want to eat too much red meat. So I hope, yeah, that answers the question. That the bigger issue is more that they're just dropping it from their repertoire a little bit. There's a proportion that are just the extreme kind of won't eat any animal, you know, environmental reasons and welfare. But the bigger piece is dropping from repertoire because of health.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Dowie.
Yeah, just ask Livia, what's the consumer's perception of grass fed? Do they believe the animal lives outside all year round?
They absolutely think that the animals are skipping around outside, eating just grass all year round. And even on the Asda product, you know, again, it's like, how much do you educate them? Which is a point that Katie made, because we have to put these kind of asterisks that say, well, actually, it's, you know, animals need a mixed diet and grass and grain fed. And there's a Sainsbury's product where Sainsbury's have put grass and grain fed. But yeah, I think the customer assumption is like basically free range is the equivalent of free range. It kind of denotes to them free range as you'd see in chickens. So the assumption is more than what it actually is.
Because sometimes on the dairy side, some of them processors stipulate that cows must spend a minimum of X number of days outside. We'd like to see something like that coming in for the beef cattle.
Yeah, well, there would be already in a lot of kind of the beef cattle specs with our retailers. So yeah, it's kind of stipulated, but what customers assume is different.
Thanks.
Is that everything, Dowie?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's more of a statement really than a question from Paul in the chat, just saying that we need to ensure that every pack of our meat, regardless of retailer packaging, gives the consumers a good eating experience. Obviously, we need that because otherwise they won't go back and repurchase. So everything that obviously goes out from us, we want people to have a good eating experience. And yeah, the prime beef producers face the same inflationary pressures that consumers face, and it's vital that we keep sustainability in the supply chain and strong marketing to ensure that the products are viable, which, yes, we are constantly trying to promote the product and keep that on the agendas. Has anybody else got any questions at all? Claire, is that an old hand? Yeah, I think Nigel.
Yeah, just a couple of things really. Do you do research on finding alternative uses for the meat that would normally go into joints? So that it seems to me that shifting joints is the hardest part now. And I just wonder whether you do any work in and around that.
Yeah, definitely. We aren't trying to actually move the cuts into a completely new format or do anything different with it. It's about how we evolve joints to be a bit more consumer friendly, because there is, you know, we look at kind of decline numbers, but there is still a huge proportion of people who will have a Sunday roast occasion, and it's just a case of making sure it's beef and not chicken, you know, because you've got chicken like cook in the bag and stuff like that. So there's kind of lazy shortcuts with chicken, which we don't have in beef. But in answer to your question, that's where we need the category to go. There's definitely a recognition that the occasions will be smaller, so joints won't. We want to sell more, but kind of reduce portions and opening some of the weight bands. We've done a lot of work on that over the years to make sure that a household that's got 2 or 3 people in it can still have a good roast dinner on a Sunday. And then there's also like the ease of cook element and what technical processes can be done to the cut to ensure an eating quality, to ensure best possible cook time, shortest cook time. yeah, so all that kind of NPD and research and development goes into the products. We haven't landed a good joint in the bag like equivalent like chicken's got, but there's definitely work underway, and that would be a big win for the category, and would potentially get new occasions in there for like younger people who feel less confident, need a bit more help.
Adrian.
Olivia, as a view, the challenge on eating quality is that what you think is a good eating quality and what I think is a good eating quality are two completely different things. And therefore, chicken is either cooked or not cooked.
Totally, yeah.
And therefore, if you try and produce something that is eat in the bag, it will fail for 50% of the people.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
My view is that the education is far better spent at school level to educate people on cooking and cooking raw ingredients, rather than trying to invent something that will disappoint at least half the people.
Yeah, definitely. I do completely agree. There is that challenge. You could also argue that the 50% that would be disappointed if they bought this kind of easier to cook joint should be buying our, really nice premium tier joints because they're confident and they know what to do with it. So they wouldn't find themselves buying the easy to cook route because they're out there already slightly easy in the just cook section, the really small trays with the grey joints that cook up. And I think there's kind of maybe two different customers. Hopefully they wouldn't find themselves buying the product in the first place. But you're right, if we could just educate people and from the outset, that would be a win.
Maybe something a bit more challenging for you. How many of your consumers, realise that their ready meal beef is not British?
I couldn't tell you. I haven't spoken to customers directly about it, but it is on pack. It is on pack.
What, packed in the UK or actual UK beef?
They have.
So it's very different.
Yeah, it depends on the retailer, but I was actually looking at this last week in terms of ready meals, and they keep it broad, definitely, but down the ready meal aisle you'll see
beef.
no, but they will put that as the origin. They will put wherever the origin is, and then they'll put packed in the UK. So customers, if they want to read it, can get to it. But yeah, maybe there's people assuming it is and it isn't.
There's generally a big British flag on it because it's packed in the UK, but you have to read into the finer detail to find that the beef is probably from Botswana or Uruguay.
But again, we can't. We can lead the horse to water, but we can't make them read what's on pack. Or the other thing that we've got the challenge with, we can all produce the best beef possible. You guys on farm, us through the process, but then the consumer can very quickly ruin a piece of beef or lamb or chicken for the equivalent if they cook it badly. Every food burns if it's cooked badly. So that's the other problem. Our products are put into their hands at the end of the day.
I'm not denying that, Katie. That I suppose that the challenge becomes that in a ready meal, that the assumptions that it's British, and if they have a poor eating experience of a meat product, they steer away from beef. Generally, I think the workings out is roughly 5 to 6 weeks before they come back, when it may not even be our produce.
I really couldn't tell you because we don't work in the ready meals category. I don't look at it too much. You'd probably be right to assume that some people assume it's British, but I think a lot of people do kind of read pack and try and understand it. I didn't know they were flagging non-British beef as British beef. It surprises me.
They're not flagging it as British beef. They're flagging it as a British ready meal.
Right. Okay. I see what you mean.
So as a classic example, could you tell me the difference between smoked Scottish salmon and Scottish smoked salmon? The consumer makes that decision in half a second.
Yeah.
One is Scottish and one is definitely not.
Yeah. No, I get it. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's a good point. I know.
I guess it's called clever marketing on their behalf, but that doesn't help us.
No, we're very transparent in the kind of raw protein category, and that's why I was saying, you know, even like on some of those like the health claims and standing up for what the product actually offers as an ingredient in a meal, we don't do it anywhere near enough. We assume they know, and you're right, Adrian, we might be over egging how much they do actually know and understand.
So Carl's asked, as a producer, are there any key takeaway messages from all the great research?
It's a big question. Key takeaway messages from all of the research. I suppose one of them has already been asked as a question, but is like, how much do we actually think they understand some of the potential sustainability claims that we'd like to make in the future? How much is it on their radar? A key takeaway is we are too in the weeds, and we know too much, and we assume customers know more than they know. So that learning for me, recently was actually, we need to be careful, like Katie was saying, about how much do we want to educate customers on this stuff. That would probably, yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of different topics here.
But I guess linking with sustainability, to be sustainable, it's all about the social, the economic, and the environmental benefits. So, and actually, they're all interlinked. So to be sustainable overall, you need to have good efficiencies on farm to be making a profit, etc., etc. So it's all intrinsically linked. And actually, if you can be more productive on farm, then actually you're more sustainable. Obviously, you're going to make more profit, and they're all interlinked, and hopefully should all be win-wins for your businesses. And I know we'll hear about that definitely more when we've got the case study later on in November from Dylan, because he's very much focused on, he generally puts sustainability above profitability, but actually then he knows now they go both hand in hand. And then again for the next couple of weeks, so next week we've got a talk on taking control of your life and your destiny. You know, what is it possible to have it all? And then the following week, sort of different but sort of interlinked, is for you and your farm, what's enough? You know, is it that you're out feeding the cattle at 10 o'clock at night with the lights on so your neighbours see that you're still working? Or is it actually finishing work at 5 o'clock so you can spend time with your wife or kids, or go and play badminton, or, you know, taking time out to go and play golf and do your social aspects? So what is enough and what is right for you and your business, what is right for one of you will be different to what's right for somebody else. But it's getting that that balance to make your business right for you and your family and your life. So I think we've got some really exciting meetings coming up, and thanks Olivia for sharing the retailer and consumer insights this evening. If anybody has got any other questions that pop up later on tonight or tomorrow or next week or whatever, just email them across and we can answer those. But thank you very much for all spending the evening with us, and thanks Olivia for your time.
Thank you for having me.
If you're not already signed up for next week, obviously let me know, and we'll see you next week hopefully. Thanks guys.
Thanks guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, bye.
Thanks guys, bye bye.
Yeah.